What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and many tickers out there very briefly. I want to talk about what just came out with the market with the data that just dropped and what you should be watching for on the technical side. Before I break things down about all this information, though, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with the $100 cash reward. The offer ends today in just about 16 hours. So check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. The market's holding up quite nicely as of right now because we just had a pretty decent PCE report that came out. The PCE numbers were aligned with the expectations, with core being a little bit cooler and many other metrics being cooler too. So specifically, personal income month over month was a little bit higher than expected. Personal spending month over month was lower than expected. Core was basically a little bit lower, or I'm sorry, very close to expectations month over month at expectations. Then PCE overall year over year was lower than expected at 3.8% versus the forecast of 3.9%. Month over month, it was lower than expected. And then last but not least, core was a little bit lower than expected, very close to expectations at 4.6% versus the forecast of 4.7%. Basically, the inflationary numbers for today that came out were as expected or lower than expected. Nothing was higher than expected, and that's some good news for the markets. But keep in mind this data is a little bit delayed. It came out for the month of May, and despite that, the market is still reacting very much to it. Now, I just want to remind everyone that at about 9:45 a.m. Eastern time, we have the Chicago PMI coming out. This is going to give us a gauge of how the economy is doing. Please watch this very carefully. This may cause more volatility for the markets. And then on top of that, at about 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report, the 5-year inflationary expectations, and all this other data that's coming out. Basically, after the first 15 minutes of market open, there's data dropping. And then after the first 30 minutes, there's even more data dropping. And all of this is going to cause more volatility for the market. So please be prepared for this. Now, so far, we saw futures quite green as we saw a very strong first half end for futures, and we want to see the market follow this trend. It's going to be the end of the first half, the end of the second quarter, and the end of the month of June. We're going to see how the market responds to this. A lot of these hedge funds and money managers want some pretty decent looking balance sheets, so they may try to hold the market up. But now let's break down the technicals very briefly. I'm going to go quick just to get as many as possible. Tesla has a potential inverse head and shoulder structure that's starting to play out. And Tesla's trying to hold above 260. To turn bullish on Tesla, we have to hold 260. If it holds 260 and starts pushing, watch 262.5. If that breaks, it's going to fly to 266 for that pre-market gap fill from before. And then after that comes some resistance at 268, but not very significant. Then 270 is going to come after that. If that breaks, there's an imbalance all the way up at 275. I'm going to be watching on Tesla all the way up here. So first, we have to hold 260. If it manages to hold it, Tesla has more room to start pumping. It's looking pretty strong so far in anticipation of deliveries. For SPY, this is looking pretty strong as well. It's at 441.5 at the time I'm recording this, very close to open. If this thing ends up dropping below the 5 EMA at 440, you're going to be watching 439 and then 438 for this gap down here. So be very careful with the gaps below. But I don't really see it dropping that hard. That's going to be a little bit surprising because so far the market's liking the data. But don't forget there's more data dropping and this could cause more volatility. So just be very careful. Now, let me add that this thing is looking bullish. There's a high probability it's going to try to keep going, but you're going to be watching resistance at 442. If 442 breaks, we're going to see this thing likely test the previous highs it made at around the 444 zone. If that breaks, it has even more room for upside. So just watch this all very carefully, watch those levels, and just know right now, at the time I'm recording this, it's looking strong. It looks like this thing wants to keep going. But like I said before, we'll see what happens with the data dropping. From a technical standpoint, it looks bullish so far. Now, let me also add that the triple Q is holding up very nicely too. It's currently at 367. If this thing tries to break out even more, you're going to be watching this resistance at 368. If that breaks, watch 370. If 370 breaks, then we have 372 and potentially even a higher high to come. If it breaks down below the 5 EMA, because all this data is dropping, it's a little bit hard to predict sometimes, especially those inflationary expectation reports. That has caused the market to drop before. So I'm just saying, just be careful and just be prepared just in case. If it breaks down watch 366, which is the 5 EMA. If that fails us, there's 364 at the 50, then 363.5 at the 200 EMA as supports. There's also this gap down here that's unfilled around the 364 level. However, from a technical standpoint, this is looking strong. It looks like even if we do get like a back test of the 5, it should try to bounce and try to keep going anyways. Now I'm just going to try to flash through as many of these as I can as fast as possible. So for AMD, this is looking more bullish to me. We have a potential accumulation structure. It's like an accumulation from a Wyckoff standpoint. And there's this imbalance up here around this 118 level. It's going to likely try to push up and get to this imbalance. Once again, looking quite strong. It looks more bullish to me from a technical standpoint. So that's like the bigger trend. Is also above the 200, which is another bullish signal. Looking at Netflix, this is once again holding up quite nicely, got above the 50 EMA. It's going to be testing this resistance, in my opinion, get very close to this like 437 to 440 area. If that breaks, it could get even higher above 440, but we have to wait and see it hold around these levels. But it's looking a little bit stronger to me, so we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with all the data dropping. If it breaks down, watch the 50 EMA as the major support around this like 430 area, and then we also have support around 426. Finally, for what else is there? Going down to where Aapl is. I wanted to talk about Aapl. Aapl is breaking another all-time high. It's currently at about 192. On the monthly on Aapl, we have a bullish cross on the MACD that is developed, and that tends to be a very bullish sign. But going back to like the 4-hour time frame, I just wanted to mention that Aapl is still looking very strong right now, even on the 4 hours. That's a very, very big shift in momentum, and the odds are still favoring the bulls for Aapl. If Aapl breaks 192, it could make its way closer to about 193.5, then potentially 195. If it breaks down, watch 191.5 as support. If that breaks, it's going to come all the way down, in my opinion, to about 191, then potentially all the way down to 190. But so far, I do believe it may get a backtest of this area, and then it could start to cool off a little bit, but I think it's going to hold support and just try to keep going, because from a technical standpoint, it looks strong, and we could see Aapl break another new all-time high today. For Coinbase, there's a bearish divergence developing the last time I checked it, so be very careful with Coinbase. But what's good about it is there's a potential bullish triangle developing at the same time. So even though Coinbase, was looking a little weak yesterday, just trying to gain some strength again, if it manages to break 75, we're going to be watching 77.5, potentially $80 after that. But for now, from a technical standpoint, it's trying to hold up, and we have a potential bullish triangle. But if it plays out, that's going to be very good. The only issue with Coinbase is on the 4-hour time frame. We're about to get a bearish cross on the PPO. Unless it tries to invalidate this, I would still be very careful. Watch 75. If it breaks that, it could turn a lot more bullish. My thesis would shift on it. But if it breaks below the 5 EMA, below the 73 support, it could come all the way back down to where this gap fill area would be, and even down to about like 71.8, and then 70 after that as support. It is looking a little bit more bullish now from a technical like pattern standpoint, but the PPO is losing some momentum, and we do have a bearish divergence developing on it. So just be careful with Coinbase. But like I said before, if it manages to break 75, I would turn a lot more bullish on it. Finally, let's just talk about Meta, then Nvda, and then end it from here. Meta is looking pretty decent so far. If we look at like the 30-minute time frame, what's going on with this? Meta, hold on. Let me just reload my page. I'm so sorry about that, guys. Sometimes this happens. The market so far is trying to hold up, but we're just going to have to wait and see how this goes. If anything, I just want to note that the market right now is showing some strength. This is what tends to happen during these like early hours of the day, especially when we get some good data. And I do apologize for that. Sometimes this happens, trying to rush through this. Going back to Meta, I'm going to pull up the chart right now. Meta, in my opinion, is still looking pretty decent. It's trying to push in the pre-market, and I believe that it has a lot of potential to try to keep going. Now, the thing about Meta is we need to actually break this resistance right here at 285. If it breaks, we could see this thing get closer to 287.5 to potentially 290. A break above 290 would turn this thing very bullish. If it breaks below these support zones, you're going to be watching 283. If that fails us, there's going to be this gap all the way down to about 281. So be very careful with it. There's a good chance it's going to try to keep going because it looks strong in the 30 minutes time frame. And finally, for Nvda is trying to hold up too, but it needs to break above this 414 resistance around the 200 EMA. If it breaks this, it's going to fly all the way up to 420 in my opinion, and then potentially 426 to 427 or so, right? We have to break above the 200 EMA first, so watch that very carefully. If it fails to break, this is going to come all the way down to 411, then fill this gap down to like 409. So watch this. Could it break and hold this 200 EMA? If it manages to do so, that's going to be bullish. If not, It is what it is. All right, guys, I want to end it from there. Thank you all so much for listening. Please be ready, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Market to the moon, the long term is very bright, and peace out.